So, so greetings. My name is Mong Tu. I am delighted to be your host for tonight's fireside. More so, very happy and delighted to introduce you to our guest speaker this evening. He's a dear friend of ours, Shahin Sobhani, also known AKA Belly by his dear wife.
Great. That's in
Um,
the recording now, Monklu. That's
it is.
fantastic.
It is. Now you'll know him as his nickname too. Um, Let me just so it's been a while. I haven't done Zoom, so if you please be patient, bear with me because there's things that pop up on the screen and I need to make sure I'm not ending the session by mistake. So we do want to proceed in English. Yes. Okay, great. So, Shine is a serial entrepreneur and a consultant who focuses on supporting companies to make an impact on the betterment of the communities they serve. He is the executive producer of 239 Days in America and One Common Faith. So, again, welcome to everyone. So happy to see all your faces. And I cannot tell you how much when I saw the topic of discussion of what will be shared or taught by Shaheen, it's just so it has such an impact on what we are living in today's society. When it's so disheartening when we turn on the TV looking at the news. Yeah, so this topic is just so on point, and I'm just so happy that Shaheen is going to be here to bring some hope in his talk with this subject. So, with this, Shaheen, please, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for spending your Thursday night with us, wherever you are in the world. Hopefully, it's beautiful. I see some old folks that I know from Frederick, Maryland, so good to see some of you there. Nice, bright faces. Um, so I'm going to start off before I put my presentation up. I know nothing about politics. I'm going to be very, very clear. So I'm not going to pretend that I do. But what I want to do is explore what politics is. So for me, this was learning, trying to put this together. And let's together see where we end up. When you hear the word politics, and what is it really, and can it really solve our problems? And I'm not going to answer it. We're going to collectively, hopefully, answer it by the end of the presentation. This is not going to be a long talk. I'm trying to keep it within 20 to 30 minutes max and then open it up for Q&A, and then we'll take it from there. So let me share my slide here. Let's see if I could put it in this format. Can everyone see my slides? Just a thumbs up.
Yep.
Excellent. So here we go. Which political system will solve the world's problems? That question alone is going to divide us immediately. Because the question is, can a political system solve the world's problems? That's what we're going to try to answer. But before we do, let us define, let's get some context, and let's define what the politics is in general. So I just looked this up on the net, and this is what it came up with. Definition: at its core, politics is about how people and groups interact to influence decision making, distribute resources, and determine the rules that govern collective life. Okay? So that is a definition of what politics is in governments, local communities, national, international, religions. Think about it. That's what the definition of politics is. So one thing I'm going to put out there is to make politics benefit everyone based on the definition above. We should first decide what the core principle should be and that we all strive to uphold. So what is the principle that we all want to at least adhere to when it comes to politics? So I think that's the first, what I would say, salvo I'm going to put out there. Can we agree on a principle that we should be looking at? I want to give some historical context. This actually comes from a letter from the Universal House of Justice March 2nd, 2013, the Universal House of Justice is the international governing body of the Baha'is of the world. This particular letter was addressed to the Baha'is of Iran, who are under severe persecution, because the fellow Iranians who are not Baha'is asked the Baha'is, hey, why are you not involved in politics to help you with your plight and persecution? It's a beautiful letter. It's a 6-page letter. And there were some quotes that not only are here, but in other slides that I thought is worth exploring to talk about, in this case, the historical context. So the one thing that came out of this letter was that humanity, it is the form of conviction of every follower of Baha'u'llah, Baha'is, is approaching today the crowning stage in a millennial-long process, which has brought it from its collective infancy to the threshold of maturity, a stage that will witness the unification of the human race. So the one thing that Baha'is believe immediately, or a principle, as you saw on the slide before, that we want to put forward, that, you know what? Maybe it's time that we look at each other as one collective race, calling it the human race. It sounds idealistic. It sounds like, really, is that what we're trying to aim for? Yes, that's what Baha'is believe, and that's what they promote. Now, it's interesting, it talks about this concept of infancy to maturity. Let's talk about that a little bit. When you looked at the city state, and then from a city state, we went to a nationhood, and now nations are holding on to their sovereignty. If you look at the progress of humanity, the next obvious step or mature step is that it sees itself living on this one planet. One of the most famous quotes of Baha'u'llah is, the earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. So we believe in this evolutionary stage of humanity, from this infancy to maturity. When I was in university, one of my good friends who was Christian asked, couldn't Christ teach about the unity of the human race? And the answer is absolutely, His Holiness Christ could have taught that. But were we ready as human beings to listen and even learn, considering we didn't even know there was another town 20 minutes from where we lived? So this concept of an evolution of the human race and the next final stage, the unification of the human race, is a principle that Baha'is are putting forward. Again, I'm giving historical context in sense of what is the principle we can all rally behind, and we're going to get into that more, of course. The second one is this concept of there's two fundamental processes that are happening, and it's because we're in an age of adolescence. Some of our older folks, we have to go back, way back, that when we were in adolescence, there was confusion. There was a confusion of who are we, what do we want to do in life, and there was a confusion of what I want to become as a human being. So in our writings, there's this concept of this, almost, as it says, Baha'is are encouraged to see in the revolutionary changes taking place in every sphere of life, the interaction of two fundamental processes. One is destructive in nature, while the other is destructive. One is destructive in nature, while the other is integrative. Both serve to carry humanity, each in its own way along the path leading towards its full maturity. So this concept that we are going to get disillusioned because people are holding on to old ways of thinking, i.e., we are first and everyone else is second, to a maturity where we believe the planet is one place and every human being has a value in that planet, right? So if we understand these two paths that are happening, it gives you a sense of direction, but it also gives you a sense of hope that these things are happening. One of the analogies given by Baha'u'llah is that the world is pregnant, and the child that's about to be born is the unity of the human race. I can't speak for the pain and everything for pregnancy, but other people on this call know what that means. So are we going to have an easy pregnancy, or are we going to have a very difficult pregnancy? The one thing for sure is the world's pregnant. There's no way to go back. And the unity of the human race is going to be born. And the question is it going to be born through consultative will or unfortunate crisis and chaos? So, the question we should ask, if we believe that the principle that we all could adhere to is that we see the planet as one, the unity of the human race, why doesn't the current political systems all around the world reinforce the oneness of humanity? That's a question we need to immediately ask. I want to make sure that everyone's clear in the room that as Baha'is, we come with eyes wide open. We're not naive in what's happening out there in the world and the conflicts that we have to deal with. However, we have hope because we're trying to understand and also pivot to what we think the world needs today. So here are just 5 reasons why the world political systems do not reinforce the oneness of humanity. One is different ideologies, and it comes to power. And I'm going to give you a quote about power later on in the consultation that comes from the Universal House of Justice. But this immediate the changes in ideology, I am this, you're that, the concept of other comes into play. So the moment you have these different ideologies, then you have a problem with trying to create unity within the context of the human race. National interests. Countries prioritize because of economic, security, social interests, and this causes disagreements. I do not have to say anything. I guarantee you, if you turn on a news channel today, you will see this impact immediately. If countries see themselves as first, while other countries as second, and every country is doing that, what do you think is going to happen? Think of kindergarten and children that do that. How do we treat them when they do that? No, you're wrong. Everyone's equal here. Let's figure this out and so forth. But that's not what we're dealing with in the world today, right? So this concept of national interest, again, is totally against the concept of the oneness of humanity. Power struggles. Political leaders and parties seek to maintain or gain power, often at the expense of cooperation. I don't need to say more than that, except let's define power. What does power really mean? And we're going to do that later on in this presentation. Cultural and historical differences. You know, when you look at just the various countries in the world and the history of these various countries, that they even would consider coming together is almost impossible. There are some silver linings, especially when it comes to economics. When you think of the European Union, for example, you would have never imagined 100 years ago, 150 years ago, that France and Germany would be united. But they have now. They have become united because of economic reasons, but they're holding on to their sovereignties as well. So it's like a almost there, but not quite. So these cultural and historical differences also do not reinforce the oneness of humanity. And then, of course, we have public opinion and elections. So this concept of creating partisan politics, creating opposing positions to get voters to vote for them, again, to maintain power or have a power position, is against the oneness of humanity. So these are just 5 examples. I'm sure there are many more, but just to give you some insights of what are we dealing with when we're looking at political systems. And if these political systems adhere to these 5, then it's against the principle that I laid out of how do we bring oneness of humanity to the world, which as Baha'is we believe is a main principle that needs to be adhered to. So, okay, then the logical question you should ask is, okay, Shahin, what is the Baha'i approach then? If you're saying that the 5 you just gave is what actually causes the conflict, what is the Baha'i approach? So the Baha'i faith teaches that political disagreement are a symptom of humanity's current disunity and lack of spiritual maturity. Baha'u'llah calls for a new model of governance based on unity, justice, and consultation. And here are some key Baha'i principles to the political system included. Now, you should immediately say, wait a minute, are you saying that the Baha'i faith is a political force? let's reserve that question for later on in our discussion. But as you read this, I want you to think of that if the answer to that question is yes or no. But definitely the governance that's created is based on unity, justice, and consultation. Now, the four things I have here, I'm going to back it up from some quotes from the Baha'i writings, but this is just at a high level of what the Baha'i approach is. Unity and diversity. So the first thing is we're not talking about uniformity here, but how do we create harmony within a diverse system of politics, culture, races, and humanity in general, which as Baha'is, we believe that is what makes humanity beautiful. But the hard work is how do you create unity amongst these various factions. The need for a world government. Shohi Effendi is the guardian of the Baha'i faith, and he describes in detail the establishment of a world federal system that balances national autonomy with global unity. And this would solve many of the conflicts between political systems. Humanity has tried and failed. Think of League of Nations, which was an attempt, but it failed. The United Nations is going toward that, but it doesn't have the strength that its mandate demands, right? Could it be a system for creating this world federal system? Perhaps, but it's an attempt that the world has made. But when 5 countries have veto rights on anything it does, then it doesn't have the power to implement what it actually brings out. Consultation instead of partisanship. This is probably what I will say is the most unique aspect of the Baha'i faith, is this concept of consultation. Because in the consultation, when it comes to decision-making process, is very, very different in political, corporate, name an environment. The Baha'i consultation is something that needs to be studied. And we're not perfect as Baha'is, but the little bit we have learned and the wisdom that it has given us, it has allowed us to function for all these years since Baha'u'llah proclaimed his mission over 160 years ago. So I would say that this Baha'i consultation, which we'll talk a little bit about in the next slide, what is it and how does it work, is a unique point of the Baha'i community and its approach to politics. Non-involvement in partisan politics, I think, is self-explanatory. How can you bring unity? If I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican. I'm a liberal, you're a conservative. That creates division. Now, I want to be very, very clear. It is a duty for every Baha'i to vote in the elections of the country they're in. That's an absolute, that it's our job to vote. But we're going to vote not as one party or another, but as an independent member of the community. And we vote our conscience and are involved in social action wherever we can. What we will not do, though, is to have a political movement or an armed political movement against one faction or another. You will not find a Baha'i Liberation Front anywhere in the world today, yesterday, or tomorrow. It just does not exist. It's against the Baha'i principles to take armed conflict to these ideas. Okay, let's move on. I wanted to at least give a little bit of context with when it comes to Baha'u'llah's writings and Abdul Baha and Shohi Effendi. So I'm just going to read some quotes just to sit there a little bit. This is from Baha'u'llah. It's a book called Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah writes, "The time must come when the imperative necessity for the holding of a vast and all-embracing assemblage of men will be universally realized. The rulers and kings of the earth must needs attend it, and participating in its deliberations, must consider such ways and means as will lay the foundation of the world's great peace among men." Thinking about this statement was written over 170 some years ago. It was radical then. Unfortunately, it's still radical today because the rulers and kings, you have to give up something to be able to participate in this in a unified way. So imagine this concept trying to be put into test today. But this is what Baha'u'llah says is needed for a great peace that the world is looking for. On partisanship and division, for the pillars of religion have been overthrown, and the basis of irreligion are now firmly established, and that which was hidden hath become manifest. And now, owing to the fluctuations of the world and its vicissitudes, and the grace and the rise of political upheavals, affairs have reached such a pass that no man knoweth what the morrow will bring. Man, that feels like that was written yesterday or even today, because there's a confusion and a state of anxiety of what's going to happen tomorrow because there's no direction. And Baha'u'llah is pointing that this concept of some moral foundation is of great need for societies to establish themselves as a force for peace. On the need for a world government, again, this comes from Shohi Effendi. Unification of the whole of mankind is the hallmark of the stage which human society is now approaching. Unity of family, of tribe, of city, state, and nation have been successfully attempted and fully established. There's no doubt about that. Unity of family, tribe, city, state, and nation. We've done it. It works. We have no issues with it. World unity is the goal towards which a harassed humanity is striving. Sometimes I just wonder if you just look at it with no prejudice, you could see what the next stage of humanity's progress is when you look at it within the context of this quote. Let's move on. Just three more quotes on the role of consultation in governance. Consultation bestoweth greater awareness and transmuteth conjecture into certitude. It is a shining light which in a dark world leadeth the way and guideth. For everything there is and will continue to be a station of perfection and maturity. The maturity of the gift of understanding is made manifest through consultation. So let's stop here and talk about consultation, Baha'i consultation, and what does it mean? So first thing is when a group of people get together and they want to follow this concept of consultation as proclaimed by Baha'u'llah, the first thing you got to do is you got to leave your ego at the door. The second thing you got to do is when you put an idea on the table, you got to let it go and detach that it's not your idea anymore. And it's the group's idea to a point that you may oppose that idea yourself based on what you hear other people are saying. And another principle of Baha'i consultation is you listen. You're not there to convince someone. You're not there to debate. You're there to listen to find the truth. And then I would say one other principle is that when a decision is made, you follow it wholeheartedly in a unified manner, even though you think, I still don't think that's a great idea, but if the collective does think that's a good idea, I'm going to put my best foot forward to follow through with that decision. This is, think of your workplace and imagine trying to even implement this concept and how many people would actually do it. I've experienced it and it's magical. And what comes out of it is unbelievable. There are books now and others that have seen Baha'i consultation and are saying we need to try this more because it has such benefits. Now imagine if political parties or governments consider trying this concept of consultation. On avoiding partisan politics, O people of Baha, it is incumbent upon each one of you to engage in the occupation and trades and crafts wherein you could profit yourself and others. This in truth is a token of the mercy of God, the Lord of all worlds. Waste not your hours in idleness and sloth, but in what will profit you and others. So in this case, we have to be useful in society. It's not, we're not going to be sitting on top of a mountain saying prayers for 12 hours. We have to find a way to roll up our sleeves and work in society, and of course live in the world that we live in and the struggles that it brings with it. On true leadership and justice, a just king is the shadow of God on earth. He walketh in the ways of his Lord and beholdeth him with his eyes. And aren't we all looking for that just king? And right now, I think that's a struggle to find one because of the power struggle that's created within political systems around the world. Now, I want to just almost coming to the end of my talk, I want to at least put something out there to talk about because the Baha'i administrative order is a force. Is it a political force or not? Again, depending on how you define politics, but based on the definition I gave in the first slide, it's something that we should at least consider and to look at. And it is a model. I want to put out there immediately. It's a model of unity and consultation. We're not perfect at it. People don't consult the way I said that they should. And we do come to blows and unfortunately just struggle with it. So it is a work in progress, but the good news is we have the foundation, we have the architectural plan, we have these writings to go back to, and then we get back up, we roll up our sleeves and try again. Just to give you a story of this, I had a good friend who was doing his PhD on consultation. He went to Papua New Guinea because he was from Australia. So he had gone to Papua New Guinea because there was a village that most of the people in the village were Baha'is. About half the people in the village were Baha'is, and half of them were not. He went to the chief, who was not a Baha'i, and he asked, "Do you see a difference between the Baha'is and people that are not Baha'is in how they function?" And before he could finish his question, the chief said, "Absolutely." And he said, "What's the difference?" He goes, "The Baha'is consult, they go and do it, and if they made a mistake, they pick themselves up, consult again, and try again." And he goes, "What's the other group do?" They consult, they make a decision, and point fingers of who was wrong and why we should never listen to them again. That's the only difference that he saw as a chief of this village when it came to consultation, because the Baha'is are making an effort to use consultation to bring unity and justice in the system. So, this administration that I'm going to talk to you about works at the local, national, and international level. When there's more than 9 Baha'is in a locality, then those Baha'is get together and they vote on who can serve on the local level. We call them local spiritual assemblies. And these local spiritual assemblies, and this goes for the local and national and international, what I'm about to say. These individuals that are elected, they're not part of any political parties or partisan elections, and they fulfill a function as their membership, not a station. It doesn't make them, since we have no clergy in the Baha'i faith, it doesn't give them any power or any prestige to be a member. In fact, I would go so far that if someone wants to be on these institutions, that disqualifies them right there, because that's exactly what you shouldn't do. It's the purpose of serving the communities. The election process in the Baha'i faith, I believe, is very unique. It's private balloting. There's no campaigning. You don't know who voted for you. You don't know who voted for who. And so it's not part of any personal ambition. It's not a paid position in any shape or form. So this concept of service really has turned upside down of institutions serving the community. Decisions are made through consultation, which we talked a little bit about. And the elected individuals do not serve a constituency. They don't even know who voted for them to be able to serve them. And they serve the entire community, not just the Baha'is that live in their communities. And the system is designed to promote unity rather than division. Everything I just told you comes from Baha'u'llah's writings himself, enhanced by Abdul Baha and Shoei Effendi. So these are not man-made principles of how it works. It was given by Baha'u'llah himself on how these administrations should function. I'm going to end my talk with these 4 quotes, but I just want to say, when it comes to the original questions, can the current political systems solve the problems of the world? If they do not, in my opinion, follow principles that sees the world as one, as human beings as one, and are not willing to put their egos aside, I don't think they can. So then the question becomes, are they useful and can they be part of societies? Absolutely. But they have to change their ways to bring about that unity. And if it's not, then we are in the maze that we deal with. Today it's someone, tomorrow it'll be others. But if the principles don't guide the decisions of how they function, I don't see how that would happen. I want to read these quotes from that hopefully will bring everything together. The first quote is from Baha'u'llah, and I hope it gives you a point that we're not sitting on the sidelines with what's going on in the world. In fact, Baha'u'llah encourages us to be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age you live in and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. So we got to roll up our sleeves and work, and we're not alone. It doesn't mean everyone's got to become a Baha'i. That's not the point here. We have to work with everyone to see if these principles that we have learned can be of some support for where the world is today. This is from Abdul Baha when he was in Paris. Be in perfect unity, never become angry with one another, love the creatures for the sake of God and not for themselves. You will never become angry or impatient if you love them for the sake of God. How powerful is that? And imagine, just even try this quote in your workplace tomorrow and see what happens within that environment. Baha'u'llah says the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. So, I mean, all these peace accords that we have signed over and over and over as humanity, the reason they fall apart is because the unity hasn't been firmly established amongst those people. The few instances that it has been established, then you have peace. And this is a fundamental principle of the Baha'i faith. And I promised you I'd talk to you about power. This is, I think, one of the fundamental problems with people that are in politics and have this power idea. They see power as a finite thing. And over here, the Universal House of Justice is saying power is not a finite entity, which is to be seized and jealously guarded. It constitutes a limitless capacity to transform that resides in the human race as a body. Give me an example of that power, Shahin? The power of love. I mean, the power of love is limitless if you are willing to open your heart and open your mind and love humanity for who they are. That power is actually very powerful, and it's within the human body and the human race. And that you don't need to bottle and guard. You want to encourage that kind of power is spread as far and wide as possible. So there you have it. I don't have much more to say. And what I would love is that we open it up to questions and answers and see what individuals. Wow, there's 45 people here now. I didn't know there's so many people. So,
All here for you, Shane.
so yeah, if people have questions and answers, put your hand up or type in the chat, and let's see how far we can go. Again, this was just to open the mind for discussion, and hopefully some of those quotes inspired you for that.
So if I see a raised hand, oh, there's one.
Isabel.
Isabel, yes.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Thank you very much. That was really wonderful. But I did notice that you used the terms power and force interchangeably in your talk. And I just wanted to say, because at the end, the quote really talked about power as being, as you said, illimitable, the power of truth, the power of love, the power of justice, all those things. The force always creates counterforce.
Yep.
It's a push against push, whereas power absolutely, totally undermines force.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sort of really think that, yeah, the Baha'i faith is not about force at all. It's all about power
Mm-hmm.
in those terms. And the other thing that I just wanted to ask you about what you think about this. Today I was listening to somebody and they said in the current political structures of the world, which depend on economic backing for people to gain those positions, integrity is not desirable.
Mm-hmm.
it's just not desirable. What do you think about that?
I don't believe in it. I think the concept of having integrity based on some moral framework is a must. You cannot not have that, and I think that's part of the confusion and problem. For me, it's amazing as things that even 10, 15 years ago were given have already all of a sudden turned around, become false. How's that possible, right? But I think if there isn't some sort of foundation that we can all aspire to, then it's a problem. It reminds me of a lighthouse, right? It feels like the world is is looking for a direction, but all the lights of the lighthouse are turned off. Well, that's very dangerous because the chances of crashing into each other and into the shore becomes high. But that one little flicker of light will changes everything. And I think that those are the discussions we need to have when we elevate our conversations with our fellow beings that we're on this planet with.
Thank you.
Robert?
I think G has
Oh,
raised his hand.
sorry.
And
Montu,
then
you
Robert, you're
know.
next.
Sorry, Montu. Sorry. You know better.
So G, I'm gonna go ahead, please.
Hey, so my question was regarding the sovereignty aspect of, nationhoods. How do we reconcile like the differences in terms of, you know, I understand that there's going to be like a governing body that can, like, let's say a country's sovereignty is violated by a bigger power, and that the international community will come to their aid. How do you like who's like what's the head like how do you coordinate all this in terms of, because we're not supposed to like enforce power by violence or anything like that, but it's clear that there's some groups and some powers with lots of influence that they don't care about whether you enforce it in good faith or not. It's all about who has the bigger gun. So when you don't have a gun, but you have, virtues and word and knowledge, but the enemy has a bigger, baton, how do you defend against that kind of approach against people who don't want that reconciliation?
Excellent question, Gaz. And I think it's some that we should take historical context to. Who had the biggest gun during the time of Pharaoh and Moses? Pharaoh for sure. Who had the biggest gun during the time of the Roman Empire and Jesus? Caesar for sure. So the question is, do we believe these divines to supersede these powers that exist today? God, there's no time frame from God, right? Right now, there's a Christian in every corner on the planet. But I don't see any Romans. Right? The only thing we have of Caesar is Caesar's pizza and Caesar salad. That's all we got, right? So the power is gone. And it didn't take that much time when you think about it in the context of human history, right? So that's why I think we need to immediately, if the Christians just looked at that period and that moment, they would say, you know what, close this thing down. We don't got a chance in hell against this power. But they got a lot of power because they took care of the housekeeping of society. They had children's classes, study circles, and said, hey, don't kill each other. Let's get together and solve the conflict and so forth. And when the Roman Empire fell, all of Europe fell into the lap of Christ. That was the church that was doing that in that example, right? So I think you got to look at it within the context of history as well. Now, it's very painful. I agree with what you're saying, guys, in the sense of, the person with the biggest gun. But, there are flickers of hope. I mean, when you look at the Gulf War, again, I don't want to get into the politics of it just for a second. But, the world did come together, maybe for the wrong reasons, because they wanted oil. Again, I don't want to get into the politics. But they did get together, and they decided that, no, this is wrong. You went into a sovereign state called Kuwait, and they pushed them back. And by the way, that is a principle of Baha'u'llah called collective security, that if one nation attacks another nation, all the other nations have to get together and remove that government from that country. But they did one thing they didn't do. Baha'u'llah also in that quote says, and they should destroy that government. That government shouldn't exist anymore for the action that they made, for example. So I think when it comes to this question that you asked, which is a very valid question, do we have faith and belief that what we see today, is this really what's going to happen for the rest of society in the future? It's a hard one. I'm not saying just believe, trust me. No, that's not. But do look at history and see what's happened. I think that helps. Mungtu?
Thank you, Jazz. Robert, you're next. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Joanne. Joanne, it was really wonderful, and I apologize for being late, but if I may just comment on a couple of things that you mentioned, and then I will ask you a question.
Sure.
That when you compare Romans and Christians, I think a reasonable person could also argue that not only Romans do not exist today, but neither does the religion of Jesus. So there may be people who are Christians or Muslims, but the religion of Jesus is rarely being practiced today. And something that, widely known by authors have, Howard Thurman, who have mentioned that with regards to what the church has done to Blacks and their complicity in it. And then, one question in general is that everything that you have mentioned, which I agree with as a Baha'i, but these are just conclusory statements. There is no scientific evidence in the presentation as to why consultation, to show that the consultation actually works the way the Baha'i faith presents it. There is, why does it work? Why would it work? And then how would you implement it? So for example, if Shahin, you were in charge of the world today, and you were appointed by the Universal House of Justice to make a change, what would that change be? The first most important change that you would implement. And then if I may also ask, what would, sorry, I'm going on and on, but there are a couple of things, Shahin, that's very important if this system, the Baha'i system, is to work. And that needs to be addressed because, it's in the details. And one is the importance of obedience. To the extent that there is unity in the Baha'i faith, it's because of power of the covenant and obedience to the covenant. And then the second thing is limitations on freedom of speech. So those need to be addressed. And I think I see that people just not only, they just don't discuss them. So one other question is that what would the role of media be under the Baha'i system in the world? Thank you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you. First question, I would, if someone said you're in charge of the world, I would say, please ask my wife. She'll take care of it because I can't do it. That's for sure. I'm not even gonna go there. I'd mess it up so much more. And I think that is the beauty of all faiths. If you look at the Bible, His Holiness Christ said, "The meek will inherit the earth." The meek will inherit the earth. Not the billionaire, not the pharaoh, not the Caesar, The meek. The meek is every day, everyone, all of us, we're the meek, right? So I don't think the power is in the individual anymore. The power is in the collective of humanity. So I don't think one individual is going to do that. Even within the context of the Baha'i faith, that's one thing I should have said in my presentation. The individuals are meaningless in those institutions. It's the institutions that have the power. The individuals, of course, participate in it and consult, and the decisions are made, but it's the individuals that have the power, not the institutions that have the power, not the individuals per se. I think your comment about which starts a whole nother. I mean, it could be a fireside by itself. Is who's a true Christian today? I think that is a very important discussion, because I believe there are true Christians in the world, and they're doing their best to follow the principles of Christ. But the moment interpretation and I'm right and you're wrong comes into play, then it destroys the fabric of that religion and unfortunately the message of Christ. I'll give you an example. I was in Washington D.C. when I used to live in Frederick, and it was a Sunday morning, and I was going somewhere, and I was at a red light that took forever. And I know why it took forever, because 4 churches on each corner had come out, and they were going to their cars, and everybody was saying hi to each other from across the street. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Here's 4 churches all following Christ, but in 4 different buildings, following their own version of it. And no one thought, guys, maybe you are all one. Have you ever thought of that? It just hit me so hard on the concept of interpretation of these faiths and what it causes as well. And of course, I'm glad you brought up the covenant, because that is what creates the unity in the human race. You ask, how is it working? I think there's a document called One Common Faith, which was written in 2005. I highly suggest everyone go read it. We created a e-learning course out of it, onecommonfaith.net. I'll put it on the chat. It's a great example of how faith can not only bring people together, but the Universal House of Justice puts the Baha'is around the world as a model that you should test and kick the tires with, to make it happen. To give you a practical element is through a story. The Baha'is of Benin, this is about 15, 20 years ago. There was a village in the middle of Benin. They had no schools, the villagers, but they did have a local spiritual assembly. And they read from the writings that compulsory education is one of the principles of the Baha'i faith. And now they're Baha'is. But there's no schools. So what did they do? They consulted together and said, let's solicit some support of educators and let's start a school. And their first school was under a tree. They found the biggest tree in the village, and they brought the kids and they started teaching them. It became so powerful that the entire community got around it, and they finally built a very, very, very small schoolhouse for the kids to go to school every day. It became so powerful that the village down the road said, how did you do that? Can we do it? They said, sure. That village got a school. Another village got a school. And he kept going until the government of Benin asked those villagers, what you've created is amazing. Can you help us create a mandate for the entire country? So that is a practical example of how grassroots, if you believe in a principle and you're going to go put it into practice, that was very scientific. Was it difficult? Hell yes. Did they have issues? Absolutely. Did it almost fail? Many times. But they're still running them, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of kids that have been educated through it. Sorry, Mungtu, that took longer.
Thank you, Shahin. I did put in the chat the onecommonfaith.net.
Thank you.
So that's referring to what Shahin was just talking about. And I see Sharla have her hand up. So please go ahead with your question, Sharla.
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. As you were talking and you mentioned the meek shall inherit the earth, I was thinking, I think we are the meek until we decide to control others. And then we're not meek anymore. And I think this question of consultation is very important, and how we learn to consult and what is the input is very important. I was on an assembly, and of course, I feel that the 9 people consulting is much more powerful than less people. I find there's a special outcome, special thing that happens when the institution of local spiritual assembly, national spiritual assembly, and Universal House of Justice consult. And I find that sometimes in assembly meetings, we kind of said, okay, let's have 2 or 3 people. We don't have the time. Get together and think about it and come out with an answer, and that's sent out. And also, what is the input? Do we listen at the feast to the community? Do we take in their concern, or do we consult and tell them what to do? So ground up is very important. So these are some of the things that sometimes happen in consultation. Some years ago, we used to consult as parents and tell our kids what to do. And they turned out to us and said, look, that's not consultation. You didn't ask us what you want to do, and you consulted and decided. So we decided that we would consult together as a family. And until the age of 15, we would make the final decision. After the age of 15, they would make the final decision. And whoever made the final decision had to live with the consequence. And if they found that what they had decided was not reasonable, they could come back and consult further. So we found that worked much better. So I'm wondering, how do we consult, and do we really truly tell others that there are many inputs, as well as the way we consult and what is considered? That's very important, and who's part of it?
I think this is a beautiful question, and I'm glad you brought up consultation again, because I think it's one of the tools that we are still trying to figure out how to use. And you know, I was asked for, in a corporate environment, I was asked to bring about a new idea of how groups can work together. So I said, you know, there's this concept of consultation I would like to try out with this group. And I had a partner in that. And she was wonderful because she just knew how to work with diverse groups. Anyway, I put up a presentation, very similar. I mean, not the presentation I showed you here, but when it came to consultation, I said, let's all try to follow these principles. Leave the ego at the door. When you consult, listen, no agenda, and so forth and so on. And let's make decisions based on these parameters of consultation. Don't forget, this is corporate America. This was in Chicago. There were 12 people in the room, and they said, okay, let's give it a go. And people check themselves. Hey, that's not your idea anymore. That's everybody's idea. Oh yeah, I forgot. Okay. And we tried, and we did it for about 4 hours. By the end, 2 people started crying and said, I've never been heard like I was heard here today. They felt so comfortable sharing because they know there was no agenda. No one had an agenda of what was going on. People were actually listening. I think one of the issues we have is we don't listen enough. As someone's talking, you're already thinking, how am I going to counteract what he's saying? Well, then you're not listening whatsoever. So then how can you have true consultation when that happens? But I tell you, give it a go. Try this within your family, your workplace, your friends, and see how far it goes, and see if it'll have an impact. I'm pretty sure it will, because I've seen it in action, and it's pretty incredible.
One thing that I love about Universal House of Justice, they rotate the chairmanship. And I think that helps, because sometimes as chairperson, we tend to want to take over. And I'm wondering if other people have felt that.
Mangtu?
Thank you, Shala. Mr. Bob LeBlanc, next.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to be here with all of you. And thanks, Shahin, for this presentation. You know, we look at the world and what's going on there out there, as you mentioned, we look at the news and there's so much disunity. And you said, is there any way we can ever achieve this unity? I mean, it really seems like the world is going in the opposite direction. And maybe that's the way we have to go, because that's maybe going to be God's way to shake us up and come to this point of unity. I just want to share this quote, and I think many of the Baha'is have seen it before, but this one from Shoghi Effendi. Adversity, prolonged, worldwide, afflictive, allied to chaos and universal destruction, must needs convulse the nations, stir the conscience of the world, disillusion the masses, precipitate a radical change in the very conception of society, and coalesce ultimately the disjointed, the bleeding limbs of mankind into one body, single, organically united and indivisible. And it just seems that we're not going to be able to go to this place of world unity and world consciousness until we get shaken up by this adversity, this worldwide afflictive chaos, the universal destruction. These are strong words the Guardian used. So I don't know where else, how else we can do it, unless we teach a lot and more people become Baha'is and start believing in these things. But right now we're so tiny, and I don't know what can bring this world assemblage that Baha'u'llah wants us to have.
Bob, put your quote back up. Put your quote back up.
Yeah.
Just for a second for everybody. As you're reading this, convulse the nation, stir the conscience, disillusion the masses, coalesce and bleeding limbs. Now I want you to think of pregnancy.
Yeah.
Just think of pregnancy just for a second while you're reading this. The body, what it goes through. Again, I can't speak for pregnancy, but what the body of a woman goes through to give that birth, right? When you read these words, you're like, oh my God, right? But we have to think of what comes out of it. And what comes out of it is a mankind with one body, single, organically united, and indivisible, which is absolutely beautiful. The only question is, do we want to go through it peacefully? Do we want to have an easy pregnancy or a difficult pregnancy? For me, that when I read that quote, that's the only thing, and it's along the lines of putting our hand out and cooperate with individuals that also see the unity of the human race as a prerequisite to a peaceful society that we're trying to build. Thank
Don't
you.
you think we are moving in the direction of a painful pregnancy, painful birth?
You know, the other quote, the other one we could put up is a document from the Universal House of Justice called the Promise of World Peace. It's there, they say peace is inevitable, right? But do we want it through consultative will or unimaginable horrors? What I think we have to be careful, though, is that we become paralyzed because we feel the world is going through unimaginable horrors. So be it. There's another quote from the House of Justice. If that's the world that decides to make that decision, we can't be paralyzed, and we have to continue to bring hope to the world.
Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts?
If you have any comments that you want me to share, you can just type it into the chat box. If not, this will conclude this talk. And thank you so much, Shahin, for giving this talk to us tonight.
There's another hand up.
Oh, we do? Rob.
Yeah, I see.
Sorry,
Robert.
Robert. Please, Robert. And one last one, please, Robert. Go ahead.
May I have a follow-up,
Yeah,
Shahin?
go for it.
So I want to emphasize that this system, in my view, the Baha'i system, requires some essential elements that is very hard to sell to today's society unless, and those are obedience, which I included in my first question, and then limited speech and limited media. And these are important and they need to be addressed even at this high level of presentation. So, and then of course, there is faith. And as I said, this system is presented based on faith and not, in my view, the scientific evidence. And I think that ultimately, as Baha'i international community has stated, as well as universal laws of justice, and you included that these cannot be accomplished unless we have unity. And for unity to be implemented, you have to start, and this is where the BIC says that the fundamental reason for lack of unity and all of our problems is the failure of people to accept and internalize the spiritual fact that mankind is one. And justice follows that. You know, if you think that people in some other country are inferior to you, then justice will become different. And that internalization, I think, is where the Baha'i faith comes into the picture, because it requires faith and it requires sacrifice. And sacrifice is another element that is necessary in the system, but it's never addressed. In order for us to be fair, if you had 500, like in United States, 500,000 COVID vaccines, and well, how would you distribute that? Well, the United States decided how it would be distributed within the United States. But what percentage of people do you think, or well, I think it would be a low percentage of Americans who would send their vaccines to people who are in dire need of that vaccine in Gaza or Russia, or you name it, Iran. So these are ideals that when you go one step deeper, then it becomes so complex. And I mean, who would disagree with good consultation? People accept that, and they say, "Oh, I am united with everyone." It's the next level that starts becoming very complex. So disobedience, limited speech, and limited media are things that I hope tonight or at some other time you would address. Thank you.
Thank you. Pongtu, I think Sandeep also had a hand up.
That's right. Please go ahead, and if we can.
Hi. Hello. Good. Lovely. Shahin, that was a lovely presentation. Just one issue that does come. I found the concept of that pregnancy very fascinating, and they reassure us that at the end of the pregnancy, there is going to be a baby, which is a cause of great relief. So, for our understanding, the baby that we have is the unity of mankind. And we're going through that period of pregnancy, which is going to be uncomfortable, and there are going to be many issues with that. Now, the very concept of getting pregnant or establishing or going forward is based on which uh, people take a decision to expand their identity or to, sacrifice for the fulfillment of something to happen. The conflict that we primarily face is the human identity. Okay, that unless the person wishes to carry the race forward, she wouldn't go through the process of getting pregnant anyway. All right, now what I'm trying to lay emphasis upon is the fact that we have a case of the human identity or our identity, which needs to undergo a transformation. And fortunately, within our system, we have the method which is being elucidated by the various communications from the House of Justice. Now, one of the conflicts that is taking place is that society wants to go in one direction, all right? Because what we wish to achieve is in society is contrary to the will of the society. And very often, like friends have now been discussing, this generates a sort of paralysis, which leads to social frustration and apathy. Like nothing's going to happen, things are pretty bad, that's just about it. Now, there is a confusion with us that the high ideals that we have, all right, this causes, in conflict with the society, this causes us to feel quite frustrated. Now, the solution primarily requires a rethink in terms of human nature, because we are basically selfish, that's understood. But no, Baha'u'llah says humans are noble. Okay. Now, the method that we have to do it, uh, and it's very power dominated, the method that we have is education. And we have seen by various implementations throughout the world, in the Baha'i world, where consultation is so important. Where one of the most fascinating things you mentioned is, all right, in Baha'i consultation, if you make a mistake, you can always come back and reconsult upon it. Okay, because your final purpose is to keep things together and get going forward. Now, the benefits we do have are the powers of truth, knowledge, unity, selflessness, which is sacrifice, and justice. Okay, these are the five powers that compete against the power, the power of domination or the human nature to dominate. Okay, so primarily, as Baha'is, what we do experience is a rethink, change in attitude. At the end of the day, it's all attitude. Are we conscious of our role as human beings? And are we prepared to sacrifice for the baby that's going to come about? Which we have been reassured repeatedly in our writing. Right? So overall, I feel that the consultation is one of the most driving principles, and the destination is world unity.
Yeah.
That's the touchstone. Does this particular act promote world unity? And that's what the Baha'i administration is all about.
Yeah.
And fortunately, again, just referring to one of the books that's come out, the book number 10, which is in which we are talking about accompaniment, we're talking about knowing, talking about imbibing our belief and then doing something about it. So talking about it is really not enough. We need to do something.
Yeah.
Right? The lady has to look after the baby that's growing in her to know that the baby is normal. If she doesn't go through a prenatal checkup, you never know what's going to happen to that baby. So we need to put our shoulders to the boulder and move it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just gonna make one comment. I think that was the last question anyway, and then we'll move
Yeah.
on. By the way, when I say the baby is born, that's just the beginning. That means humanity accepts that we're one as human race. But now the real work begins of how do you implement that into every institution, into every school, into every government, into every corporate world. I mean, the hard work actually really begins. Whoever has had a child here, realize having the baby, to be honest, is the easy part. That baby becoming a useful member of society and actually implementing all the principles you believe that baby needs to have to be useful. That's the real work that we will come. So you think we're having hard times now? Ooh, wait till the baby is born, baby. And then the hard work begins. And we got to remember that as well.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Before we end the session, and we do have a devotional part at the end for friends that want to stay and share prayer, share a chant with us, are more than welcome to stay. Um, I just want to end with one last comment from one of our guests who I believe she has to leave. It's from Firuz. So something to ponder. Her comment was, to me, there is a growing tension and frustration that is becoming unbearable. What the world truly needs is a guiding light, one that captures attention, through the power of music and the wisdom found in words. So that's the one comment we have from Firuz. Friends, next week, Firuz is back. Yay! And our guest speaker is Gordon Naylor. So I'm just putting it out there for the friends to please come and join us next Thursday. And Shahin, thank you so much for giving us your Thursday evening. And this was so very such a topic that can go on, part 2, part 3, part 4. But all the questions tonight really have the discussion started going. And so, yeah, thank you again, Shahin.
Thank you.
I
Thank you,
am
everybody.
still on here for anyone who would love to stay on and share prayers. So this is it. Actually, I will.
I
Sorry.
can say a prayer for our dear community member, dear Dorothy Gilstrap, who was dear Dorothy Baker, Hand of the Cause's granddaughter. She passed away this past Monday, and her funeral will be this coming Saturday at 2 in Arlington, Texas. I would like to offer a prayer.
Please do.
Thank you. هو الله تعالی پروردگارا آمرزگارا نفس نفیسی به ملکوت شهود سود نمود و از خاکدان فانی به جهان جاودانی شتاب میهمان جدید است عزیز فرمان بنده قدیم است خلعت بدیعت ها کن ای بی نیاز بیاموز و بنواز و به خلوتگاه راز راه ده و در محفل تجلی همدم و دمساز نما تویی دهنده و بخشنده و مهربان و تویی آمرزنده و نوازنده و توانا این
O Lord, O thou whose mercy had encompassed all, whose forgiveness is transcendent, whose bounty is sublime, whose pardon and generosity are all embracing, and the light of whose forgiveness are diffused throughout the world. O Lord of glory, I entreat thee fervently and cheerfully to cast upon thy handmaiden who had ascended unto thee the glances of the eye of thy mercy. Robe her with the mantle of thy grace, bright with the ornaments of the celestial paradise, and sheltering her beneath the tree of thy oneness, illumine her face with the light of thy mercy and compassion. Bestow upon thy heavenly handmaiden, O God, the holy fragrances born of the spirit of thy forgiveness, cause her to dwell in a blissful abode, and heal her grief with the balm of thy reunion, and in accordance with thy will, grant her admission to thy holy paradise, and let the angels of thy loving kindness descend successively upon her, and shelter her beneath the blessed tree. Thou verily art ever forgiving, the most generous, the all bountiful.
O thou provider, O thou forgiver, a noble soul had ascended unto the kingdom of reality and hastened from the mortal world of dust to the realm of everlasting glory. Exalt the station of this recently arrived guest and attire this long-standing servant with a new and wondrous robe. O thou peerless Lord, grant thy forgiveness and tender care so that this soul may be admitted into the retreats of thy mysteries and may become an intimate companion in the assemblage of splendors. Thou art the giver, the bestower, the ever-loving. Thou art the pardoner, the tender, the most powerful. Abdul Baha.
Is there any remover of difficulty save God? Hey, praise be God, He is God. All are His servants, and all abide by His bidding. Is there any remover of difficulty save God? Say, praise be God, He is God. All are His servants, and all abide by His bidding. Is there any remover of difficulty? Say God. Say, praise be God, He is God. All are His servants, and all abide by His bidding. Ya Baha'u'llah, Ya Aliul A'la.
I like to say this this quote I just found from someone sent it to me from Abdul Baha, considering the work ahead and the power we have. And when you read this, when I say this quote, it feels like we could walk on water. It's such a beautiful quote I have never seen. And then I'm going to have to sign off, but I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. But here's the quote from Abdul Baha. O ye my soldiers of the kingdom, be you valiant and fearless. Day by day add to your spiritual victories. Be you not disturbed by the constant assaults of the enemies. Attack ye like unto the roaring lions. Have no thought of yourselves, for the invisible armies of the kingdom are fighting on your side. Enter ye the battlefield with the confirmations of the Holy Spirit. Know ye of a certainty that the powers of the kingdom of Abha are with you. The hosts of the heaven of truth are with you. The cool breezes of the paradise of Abha are wafting over your heated brows. Not for a moment are you alone. Not for a second are you left to yourselves. The beauty of Abha is with you. The glorious God is with you. The King of Kings is with you.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
I'm going to chant hidden words number 70. به نام گوینده توانا ای پسر خوش ساحتی از ساحت هستی اگر اندر آیی و نیکو بساطی است بساط باقی اگر از ملک فانی برتر خرامی و ملیح است نشاط مستی اگر ساغر معانی از ید غلام الهی بیاشامی اگر به این مراتب فائز شوی از نیستی و فنا و مهنت و خطا فارغ گردی